Welcome back to AM News. Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is facing his first state election defeat since taking charge last year. Opinion polls show a result that would dent his chances of consolidating power needed to speed up an economic recovery. And in India's capital, Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, also known as the BJP, is locked in a tight race with the Aam Aadmi, or Common Man Party, also known as the AAP. And voters in the Indian capital, New Delhi, went to the polls early on Saturday morning to cast their votes for a new state government for the second time in 14 months amid tight security. But for more on the story, we're now joined in our studios by Professor Dilip Menon, the Director of Centre of Indian Studies in Africa, also known as CISA from WITS. Prof, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, India had elections 14 months ago, but what are these ones all about?
See, those were the national elections for the National Assembly. So what we have now in Delhi are the state elections, what you would call provinces here. And there's another one coming up in the state of Bihar. So the Delhi will go first and Bihar will go second in the state elections.
Okay. And we mentioned in our intro that Narendra Modi, of course, won those elections. But opinion polls show a different result, that people are not necessarily happy with him.
See, it's difficult to say who's happy and who isn't. Narendra Modi came to won last year's elections with a convincing majority, but actually with a very small percentage of the actual votes polled. So in the 60 years that India has been a democracy, this has been the elections in which a party has come to power with such low votes polled. And it's a first past the post system. Now, I think these elections are crucial because while the Indian middle classes are fairly happy, with the idea that now we are establishing relations with the United States, with Japan, President Barack Obama attended our Republic Day parade and so on. But there's some fundamental issues related to issues of dispossession, poverty, inequality, which continue. And it's not very clear that the Bharatiya Janata Party is handling these very effectively. And issues of corruption are fairly large, as in most countries of the world, and you're familiar with such issues in South Africa.
Absolutely.
So the AAP party, the Aam Aadmi party, has been taking up these two issues, both of poverty and inequality and of corruption in politics, and tried to make that the central platform for any consensus on political democracy in India.
And with some of those issues that you mentioned, Prof, wouldn't allegations of Hindu fundamentalism also play a key role in these issues, of course, taking place currently against Narendra Modi?
Actually, it's not very clear that the Prime Minister himself may be centrally involved, but there has been a silence from the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister. 4 churches have been burnt in the capital city of Delhi in the last 2 months. And copies of the Bible have been burned publicly. And so there is a sense that there is the underside of the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is slowly surfacing. The idea of Hindu right-wing fundamentalism. There have been attempts to reconvert people back into Hinduism, people who had converted to Christianity and Islam. So I think there is a sense that the BJP, or the Bharatiya Janata Party, is a party that is, in some sense, riven into two. There is the progressive development, economics, and world power-oriented model, and then there is the underside, which is really that of Hindu right-wing fundamentalism.
It's interesting that you mentioned religion as well, and with Muslims and Hinduism as well. But we understand the Prime Minister was also accused of, or rather being linked to the Muslim killings that took place in Gujarat. But do you understand the reasons behind those killings?
The reasons behind those killings, now the thing is that the courts have been, courts have acquitted the Prime Minister of direct involvement, but we do know that in Gujarat there was a degree of polarization that benefited the party. And it's interesting that studies of Indian elections have shown that in places where there are high Muslim minorities, high percentage of Muslim minorities, communal riots, as we call them in India, riots where Muslims are attacked, these actually precede elections in which Hindu right-wing parties actually benefit from. So there is the sense that in India, among certain Hindus, that even though India is a Hindu majority country, that minorities are being appeased. Now, this is not true, but then that's... the BJP in 2002 took advantage of such a sentiment and showed or tried to show to the electorate that we can discipline the Muslim minority and therefore they came to power and stayed in power. Since then, Mr. Narendra Modi, who was then the Chief Minister, has engaged himself with issues of development and so on. But I think that question mark still remains. It's a nagging question as to whether the BJP has given up its platform of a majoritarian party which is convinced that India is a Hindu country, which it is not.
Now, speaking of parties as well, Professor, I mean, you mentioned a lot of the Aam Aadmi or Common Man Party, but who are they and why have they grown so strong in these elections?
See, the Aam Aadmi Party emerged out of an anti-corruption campaign which was started 2 years ago, of which Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, the current head of the Aam Aadmi Party, was one of the organizers. Mr. Kejriwal has been involved in grassroots campaigns for transparency in political democracy. He was one of the movers of the Right to Information bill, which subsequently became an act, where every Indian citizen has the right to know what the government is doing, where cases are, whether disputes have reached resolution, and so on. So he comes from a mass organization background. He's won the Raman Magsaysay Award, which is the premier award in Asia. In Delhi, the central issue is that Delhi is a particular kind of city. There are large numbers of floating population. People come in, large numbers of migrants come into Delhi. It's a bit like Johannesburg. So they come in for work. And so you have a vast underclass who are not being represented. There are large numbers of informal colonies that have come up. And AAP is actually tapping into these places. And they are saying, well, what people need are not dreams of democracy. They need water, they need electricity, and they need to know that they will not be exploited by the policeman on the street who will ask them for bribes and so on. All of these have resonances for you in South Africa as well. Yeah. So Aam Aadmi Party has insisted that this is our platform, that government should be influenced by people and by popular sovereignty, that people need to participate in government. So a large number of their candidates are actually not coming from established political families. They are individuals who want to serve in politics. They are people who come, or one of the candidates in Seelampur, which is a constituency in Delhi, came from, who grew up in the informal colonies, was involved with the Right to Information Act, had members of her family killed, and then she stood for election and won. And she won on the idea that, look, I believe in democracy.
So would you then agree that they stand a chance against the BJP?
I think they stand more than a chance, because people in India, people in Delhi, apart from the middle classes who have seceded from the state, set up there, rather like here, you set up your own enclaves with your own water, your own electricity, and your own. For the rest of Delhi, corruption is a problem, inequality is a problem, dirt is a problem, violence is a problem, the lack of water and electricity is a problem, and that is precisely what AAP is saying we will try and get to you through your participation, right? Unlike saying, well, you elect a representative, which is what democracy has become, right? Where you give up your right to somebody else.
So then, Professor, in your opinion, who do you then think is going to emerge victorious in these elections?
It's difficult for me to say. I'm not a prophet, but going by the opinion polls and going by what I've been reading in the newspapers, you must remember I'm no longer in India. I've been watching the news and reading the newspapers. The polls predict, and my friends who are in Delhi also tell me that AAP stands a very likely chance of winning these elections. Right? Which they did not manage to do 14 months ago, and which is why they were unable to form a government. I do hope that they are able to form a government.
Thank you so much, Professor Dilip Menon, the Director of CISA from WITS. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.